I stepped into the chapel, the air thick with incense and the faint murmur of hushed voices. It had been 10 years. 10 long years since I last set foot in this place, since I had last spoken to any of them. The bitter sting of estrangement still burned, and it hit me harder now than I expected. The chapel was familiar, but it felt like a distant memory, a place where I no longer belonged. I saw Mark first, standing near the front, arms crossed tightly over his chest, as if trying to hold in everything he didn't want to feel. His eyes flicked over to me, but he didn't offer even a brief smile or a wave. No, he just glanced away, as if I were a stranger, a ghost who had no business being there. Sarah was next, standing near the door, her posture stiff and guarded. She didn't even look at me. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, as if avoiding the painful truth. I tried not to feel the sting of their coldness, but it was impossible. This was my family. And yet it felt like I had walked into a room full of people who had no place for me. I could feel their judgment in the air, thick and suffocating. 10 years had passed since I left because of the lies, the betrayal, and the silent war that had destroyed everything between us. But even after all this time, nothing had changed. They didn't want me here. I barely noticed the funeral proceeding in front of me. The words of the priest were a blur, drowned out by the weight of my own thoughts. It wasn't until the lawyer came over to me that I snapped back into reality. He handed me a small wooden box, its surface scratched and worn, as if it had carried more than just time in its corners. "This was your mother's," he said softly, his voice almost hesitant. "She left it for you." I took it from him, my fingers shaking slightly. The box felt heavier than it looked. I glanced at Mark and Sarah, both of them still close by, their eyes avoiding mine. They had already taken everything my mother had worked for, everything that once belonged to our family. And yet here I stood, holding a box that seemed so small, so insignificant compared to the wealth and the house they had claimed. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely audible, though I wasn't sure I even wanted to hear the answer. The lawyer only nodded, as if the box itself held the answer I was meant to discover. But all I felt was the sting of being left out, of being given nothing but this, nothing but a piece of wood. I looked at the box in my hands, trying to make sense of it. Why had my mother left me this? What was it supposed to mean? My mind raced, with questions. But one thing was clear. Whatever it was, it had to have some deeper meaning. Something that could explain why my mother, after all these years, had chosen to leave me with nothing more than this small, insignificant box. I held it tight, determined to find the answers inside. The service was brief, as expected. The priest's words felt empty, and the quiet sobs of the others only reminded me of the walls that had been built between us for so long. I sat there, distant, as if I were on the outside looking in. I couldn't bring myself to feel much for my mother. Not now. Not after everything. After the ceremony, we all gathered at the family home, though it no longer felt like home to me. The house was the same, but the atmosphere had changed. It was as if the walls themselves had grown cold with the years that had passed, the years I had been absent. Mark and Sarah were busy talking in low voices, glancing at me every now and then, but neither of them made an effort to approach. It was like they were pretending I wasn't there. Or maybe they didn't know what to say after everything that had happened. I watched them, how they walked through the house with such ease, like nothing had changed, like nothing had ever been broken. They had moved on. They had their families, their lives, and now they had the house, the one thing that had always kept us together. Or so I thought. But it was clear now. My mother's death had only further divided us. Mark and Sarah were already speaking in hushed tones about the inheritance. They were discussing what they were going to do with the house, how they were going to divide everything up. And I stood there, in the corner, like an outsider. They had taken it all, without even a second thought. The lawyer finally arrived and began reading the will aloud. I could hear his voice echo through the empty hall as he named Mark and Sarah, giving them the family home and all the wealth that came with it. My heart sank, but I didn't show it. I kept my face neutral, though my hands tightened around the wooden box I still held. When it was finally my turn, the lawyer barely looked up from the papers. "Emily," he said, his voice almost apologetic, "you've left this." He gestured toward the box in my hands. Nothing else. The room fell, silent. The weight of the moment hit me harder than any words could. I felt a surge of bitterness rise within me. They had everything, and I had this box. It was a cold reality, one that I couldn't ignore. Mark and Sarah exchanged uneasy glances, their guilt written clearly on their faces. But it was too late for apologies now. Too late to fix the years of hurt, the silence, the distance. All I could think about was why. Why had my mother left me nothing but this? I sat in the living room, the wooden box in my lap, my fingers tracing its edges as if it might hold the answers to questions I had been asking for years. My mind was racing with possibilities, with doubts and fears I couldn't shake. What had my mother meant by leaving me this box? Why now, after everything? I couldn't help myself. I needed to know. Slowly, I opened the box, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Inside, there was nothing but a folded piece of paper. It was old, the edges worn and creased as if it had been handled many times. My mother's handwriting was unmistakable, even though it had been years since I'd seen it. I could almost hear her voice in my head as I carefully unfolded the letter. It was short. Too short. 3 words. Just 3 words. It was you. I stared at the words, my mind going blank. What was this supposed to mean? The room around me seemed to fade as I read those 3 words again, hoping for some kind of clarity that never came. The silence in the room grew unbearable. Mark and Sarah were watching me now, their eyes wide with confusion, and I could feel their discomfort settling over the space like a heavy fog. I had to say something. I stood up, the letter trembling, in my hands. It says, "It was you." I forced the words out, unsure of how to even begin processing what this meant. The letter seemed to be directed at someone, but who? Was it meant for me? Or was it a message to one of my siblings? Was I being accused of something? Mark shifted uncomfortably, his face turning slightly pale. Sarah looked away, her fingers nervously tapping the edge of her purse. The lawyer, standing near the door, seemed just as uneasy, his eyes darting around as if he was waiting for the ground to swallow him up. No one spoke. The silence was deafening. It was as if the entire world had paused, waiting for someone to explain. But there were no explanations to be found. Just the letter. Just those 3 words. And the weight of them hanging in the air like an accusation that no one was willing to answer. I felt a sudden coldness in the pit of my stomach, the old wounds starting to reopen. My mother had always been distant, but this felt different. I had always thought that when she left, she took the secrets with her, that I would never know the truth. But now, with this letter, everything felt upended. "Mom," I whispered, more to myself than to anyone else. But there was no answer, just the echo of my own voice bouncing off the walls. I had to know what this meant. The truth was out there, buried somewhere in the past, and I couldn't leave it behind. I had to connect the dots. But first, I needed to understand what my mother had been trying to tell me with those 3 simple words. I couldn't sit still any longer. The letter in my hand, the words echoing in my mind, had to be addressed. My family, my siblings, had to face the truth. I could feel the air growing heavier with each passing minute, the tension between us, becoming palpable. No more silence. No more pretending everything was fine. It was time to confront what had been buried for so long. I stood in the living room, the walls around me feeling smaller, more confining. Mark and Sarah were sitting by the window whispering, exchanging glances that spoke volumes, volumes I had never been a part of. I wasn't going to wait for them to make the first move, not anymore. "I need to know what this means," I said, holding up the letter. My voice was calm, but I could feel the heat rising in my chest. "It says, 'It was you.' Who is it meant for?" Mark's eyes shifted, avoiding mine. He cleared his throat. I don't know what you're talking about, Em. Don't lie to me, Mark, I snapped, stepping forward. You've always been the one to cover everything up, to pretend like nothing ever happened. But I'm done pretending. I pointed to the letter in my hand. What does it mean? What is Mom trying to say? Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. She wasn't saying anything, but I could see her mind working. She wasn't innocent in this either. They both had known something I didn't. Maybe. It's time you stop digging into things you don't understand, Mark muttered, standing up. There was anger in his voice now, but it wasn't the kind of anger that came from strength. It was defensive, desperate. No, I said, my voice rising. I need to understand. This is about all of us, isn't it? Everything that's happened. All the things that were hidden from me. From everyone. And now, this letter. You think I'm just supposed to let it go? The room fell silent, and I could feel the weight of their guilt pressing down on us. Mark and Sarah were trapped, caught between the lies they had told and the truth they had kept from me. I wasn't the outsider anymore. They were. You've always thought you could shut me out, I continued, my words cutting through the quiet. You took everything from me, Mom's love, the family, the home, and now you're pretending I don't matter. Well, I do. I always have. Mark's face twisted in anger. You left. You walked away from all of us. You gave up the family. And now you want to act like we're the ones who betrayed you? That hit harder than I expected, but I didn't back down. You shut me out. And when I came back, you gave me nothing but this. I waved the letter at them. This meaningless box. You think you can erase me from the family? Pretend like I don't have a right to know the truth? Sarah looked up then, her eyes wide, full of something I hadn't expected. Regret, maybe. It's not what you think, Em, she whispered. We never wanted to leave you out, but... Then why didn't you tell me? I interrupted, my voice cracking with frustration. Why didn't you tell me what was really going on? Why didn't you tell me about Mom's secret life? The words hung in the air, and for a moment, no one moved. Then Sarah spoke, her voice trembling. Because you weren't supposed to know. Not about the will, not about the debts, and not about what really happened that night. What night? I demanded, my pulse racing. Mark's face turned pale. You really want to know? His voice dropped to a whisper. You were the one who pushed her away. You were the one who started the fight. You didn't want to stay. You didn't want to be part of the family anymore. I froze. The realization hit me like a freight train. The fight. The night I walked away, I had been the one to end it. And now, everything I had been running from came crashing back. The letter had left a bitter taste in my mouth, but now, it felt like I was choking on the truth. I couldn't stop thinking about it, about the 3 words, "It was you," and what they had meant. My mother's final message wasn't just an accusation. It was a revelation, one I wasn't ready for but couldn't ignore any longer. I needed to understand what had happened, what I had done, and how everything had spiraled into the mess we were in now. So I set out to dig deeper, to pry open the doors that had been slammed shut for so long. The first place I went was the family lawyer's office. He had been the one to read my mother's will, and I needed answers from him. When I arrived, the lawyer was seated behind his desk, flipping through papers, looking as if he was trying to avoid making eye contact. I wasn't going to let him hide behind his professionalism. I slammed the letter down in front of him, the weight of it heavy between us. I need the truth, I said, my voice trembling but firm. What is this about? What was my mother trying to protect me from? What was I a part of? The lawyer didn't immediately answer, his eyes shifting to the letter before he sighed, rubbing his temples. Emily, your mother, she didn't want you to know, he began, his voice low. She did everything she could to protect you. From the family. From the truth. What truth? I pressed, frustration bubbling inside me. What are you talking about? What was I involved in? The lawyer hesitated before answering. Your mother's will, it wasn't just about passing down assets. She was trying to protect you from the consequences of a decision you made years ago. A decision that, in many ways, tore the family apart. I felt a lump form in my throat. What decision? Your relationship with your father, he said quietly. And your choice to leave him. It was never just about you two. It was about the company, the investments, and the financial standing of the entire family. When you walked away, it set off a chain of events. Your father's company, your mother's trust, they started to crumble. Your decision to leave, it cost them more than you knew. The weight of his words hit me like a tidal wave. I had thought I was leaving to escape the chaos, to find myself again, but I hadn't realized how much my absence had affected everyone. My relationship with my father, the fallout from the business, the debts. I had been too focused on my own pain to see the damage I'd caused. I didn't know, I whispered, my voice cracking. I didn't know it was that bad. You couldn't, he said. Your mother kept it from you. She didn't want you to carry that burden. She protected you from knowing how your departure affected the family, but it was the reason why everything fell apart. I sank into the chair, the truth weighing me down, suffocating me. I had been part of the downfall. My absence, my refusal to face the family, had set in motion a series of events that no one could have predicted. My mother had tried to shield me from it, but now the consequences were staring me in the face. I had to face the truth. I had to face what I had done. And now, I needed to find a way to rebuild, not just for my family, but for myself. I couldn't undo the past, but I could move forward. I had to find peace, even if it meant confronting the demons I had been running from for so long. The family home felt suffocating, each room filled with the weight of the past. The walls, once familiar, now seemed like silent witnesses to the betrayal, the lies, and the hurt. Mark and Sarah were there, sitting across from me, and despite the years of distance between us, it felt like we were trapped in a moment that would never end. The truth had come crashing down, and now we were at a crossroads. I could feel the rage rising within me, the anger at what they had done, at how they had shut me out, at how my absence had been turned into a tool for their advantage. But revenge would be hollow. It wouldn't change anything. I had spent so many years running from my family, from the pain, from the truth. But I couldn't keep running anymore. I had to decide who I was going to be, someone trapped in bitterness, or someone who could rise above it all. Mark, Sarah, I began, my voice quieter than I had intended. I don't know what to say. You both know what you've done. You've taken everything Mom worked for, everything that was supposed to be shared. But I can't keep holding on to this anger. I'm tired of it. Sarah looked at me, tears in her eyes. Emily, I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted things to be this way. Her voice cracked, and she looked away, ashamed. But I didn't know what else to do. I was just following Mark, just trying to protect myself. Mark, sitting stiffly beside her, spoke next. I know we screwed up, Em. I know I pushed you away. I shouldn't have, but I did it because I thought it was the only way to survive. I was scared. His words were a mixture of regret and guilt. I'm sorry for everything. The apologies hung in the air between us, and for a moment, the room was silent. It was the first time they had spoken like this, the first time they had acknowledged their role in the damage. But even now, as they apologized, I wasn't sure if I could forgive them completely. They had taken so much from me, from the family. And yet, could I keep holding on to the anger? Could I let this define me? I shook my head, trying to clear the thoughts that were swirling in my mind. You both need to live with the consequences of what you've done. I can't erase that, but I can't keep fighting this. I can't keep living in the past. They nodded, and the silence between us felt different now. There was still pain, still unresolved tension, but something had shifted. It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely, but it was a step toward peace. I stood up, finally making a decision. I'm done with all of this. I'm done with the anger, with the blame. I'm going to move on, and I think you should too. I left the room. I knew it wasn't the end of everything, but it was the beginning of something else, something better. I wasn't running anymore. I was choosing to heal. I packed my bags quietly, carefully folding the clothes that once held memories of a life I no longer wanted to live. The family home had been my prison for too long. Its walls, once filled with warmth, now felt cold and suffocating. I wasn't running from the past anymore, but I was leaving it behind. It was time to step into a future where I wasn't defined by betrayal, where I wasn't haunted by things I couldn't change. The wooden box was the last thing I packed. It sat on top of the suitcase, its weight a constant reminder of the journey I had taken to get here. My mother's letter, the years of pain, the distance, it all led me to this moment. I hadn't wanted to come back to this house, but now that I was leaving it, I knew I had found something within myself. I stepped outside and looked back at the house one last time. There were no tears this time, only a quiet sense of peace. The past would always be part of me, but it didn't control me anymore. I was free. With a deep breath, I turned away, walking toward my new life, hopeful for the first time in years.